So I haven't got any slides today. I'm going to start with a quote, and that's from Dan Ariely, who is a behavioural economist from Duke, and has written a lot of the work in this sector. And he says that if you wanted to invent a problem that was difficult to solve from a psychological point of view, you'd invent global warming. So we probably call that climate change now rather than global warming. And he's right for one particular reason, is that it's pretty much distal in 4 of the dimensions that anything could be distal in, right? So for a start, it is, the effects of it are not me. There's a different thing, right? Things that affect me versus things that affect other people. It's not me. It's also, there's a geographical component. It's not here. So there's things that affect you here or things that are not here. There's a temporal component as well. So it's not now, rather than now versus not now. You talked a little bit about temporal discounting before as well. And also, rather than being clear, it is unclear in some dimensions. All right? And you'll generally find that most things which you want to communicate, most things you want to talk to people about, if you're lucky, they're kind of proximal in all those dimensions. Some of them are distal in some of those. Wherever you have all 4 of those together, it can become quite tricky. The reason is because we discount massively things that are distal in any of those dimensions. When you get all 4 together, it's a real challenge. All right? So things that are not here, not now, not me, and not clear, we massively undervalue. You can kind of see that in the sort of weft and the warp of our language as well. Eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. There's all these ways in which we describe the proximal world around us and live like that. But not only that, part of the challenge we also have, from a communication point of view, in order to deal with climate inaction, which is part of the title for today, part of the challenge, another challenge that we have is that sort of despite being clever and cognizant of the world around us, we're generally highly context dependent. The context in which information is presented to us massively affects how we decide what to do with it. So those 2 things, the distal constructs and the context in which we see and receive information, there's some examples I want to give to you today. And part of that kind of premise, which may be contentious, I don't know, but part of that premise that I present to you today is actually that how you communicate things alters people's behaviour much more significantly and much more importantly than what you communicate. It's actually essentially a packaging problem. And all of the work that we've been doing in my agency and all the work we do around changing behaviour, specifically with climate and resource use and energy efficiency, is around packaging, not what's said. Okay, so look, some examples to sort of bring that to life, particularly in the energy space. A lovely one from Sabine Palmer, sort of almost 10 years ago now. They went into DIY stores and found couples and families who were looking to sort of do some upgrades on their home. And they gave them, and they sort of got them as part of this study, they gave them money and information. Information was what you can do in your home to make your home more energy efficient, draft proofing, all those kind of things, and actually gave them free cash, right? Great, job done, everyone can go home. Of course they went home with their free money and their free information and spent that on upgrading their home, right? Who thought they did that and that was the end of the study? Yeah, no one, right? Of course. Which is strange, right? It's my advertising world, it was always, free fibres advertising was a nightmare. If you give people money, they're going to do something. They didn't. They went back again to see that cohort of people, and they did a little test. They went back, I think it was like 6 months later or something, and found out that no one had done anything. Half of the group, whom they went to visit in their own home, gave them an infrared photograph of their home at night. Infrared photograph will show you where the kind of heat is leaking through the windows and the doors, that kind of thing, right? The other half of them, they gave them some technical information. The same information, really, 14 kilowatt hours through the windows, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so 2 different ways of presenting the information. Now, the infrared photograph doesn't have any particular granular information in it, but it is now proximal in almost all of those dimensions. It's here, it's now, it's clear, and it's me. The written information was a little bit more distal. It's still requiring cognition. Still got to try and understand what to do with those 14 kilowatt hours. Now, what happened when they went back to visit them again after that, some months later? All of the people that had the infrared photograph, they were 8 times as likely to have made some changes versus the other group, 5 times as likely to have done other things that weren't on the list of things that they could have done as well, and they started to observe that there was behaviours in that home, such as closing curtains and putting down draft excluders that weren't on the list of things that could be done. Right? So simply, that one image that was proximal, that made the challenge that they were trying to deal with, here, now, me and clear, significantly changed their behaviour. Simply the way that was wrapped. Quite significant, right, in terms of energy production. And then you find those kind of things around the normative considerations as well. So we go into California. There was a lovely test, 2001, 2006, by Bollinger and Gillingham. You can look this up if you like to and come and ask me afterwards if you want to. They were looking at the prevalence and spread of solar panels on roofs in California. I did something quite nice. They had a look at all the different areas, and they found that there were the Republican areas and the Democrat areas, the areas that had a Toyota Prius and the areas that didn't have those, and used those as proxies for their proclivities to become more cognizant of climate and the world around them. And what they found was that the spread of solar panels did not match the intentions and the proclivities of those people that live there. They simply spread like a kind of virus from the first one. They found actually that there was, for every installation of solar panels, there was a 1% increase, 1% reduction in the time taken for the next set of solar panels in that community to be presented. And what was happening there is that all of a sudden, some evidence of behaviour that's normally hidden, I've got a kind of a boiler in my house that no one can see that's now super efficient. They've got the panels on the roof was a live poster, if you like, evidencing the prevalence of that behaviour in that community, saying that it was okay, showing other people that it had happened, and actually if you didn't have it, you were now becoming the outlier. And that's what they found, that in areas where even their attitude was not to be more climate aware, that they were still deploying solar panels irrespective of that. So you end up with this lovely decoupling between attitude and behaviour. So we've got proximal and distal constructions, we've got the fact that context is relevant to us, and we've now got proof about the decoupling between attitudes and behaviour. The decoupling between attitudes and behaviour is really significant, because that's where we're talking to the deliberative declarations of people versus their behaviour. You really do have to understand that those things do kind of separate significantly. Talking about the normative considerations with kind of solar panels on the roof, which was quite interesting, right? So you're seeing the evidence of prevalence of other people's behaviour. A really lovely little test, which I want to talk to you about, was Cialdini's work, actually. They were in Vegas. They went down one street in America with they sort of had federal badges on, pretended they were official, and they just knocked on the door and asked people, we've got some tap inserts and some inserts for lavatories to reduce water flow. They're free, they're from the federal government. Would you like them? The majority of people said no. It's very strange. Why are you here at my door? I don't want it. No. They went down the following street, didn't ask anyone if they wanted any inserts. They just said, do you think water conservation is a good idea? The answer to that for most people is, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Fine. Thank you very much. And off they went. Went down the third street, knocked on the door again, and said, most people in this area think water conservation is a good idea. Would you like some free tip inserts and some things? Most people would take up the offer then. Okay? So evidencing the prevalence of behaviour from other people with the solar panels, that was fine. Evidencing the opinions of other people around you is important. Right? So when I said at the opening of this, context, despite being kind of highly cognizant of the world around us, context is really important for us. There we are, there's some examples, right? The context in which we deliver information, the fact that we borrow decisions from other people, the fact that proximal constructions are much more likely to give us an effect than distal constructions. Therein lies the kind of basic premise of the 10 minutes just over that I wanted to speak to you today. But that gives us one interesting thing, right? Which is that kind of, as Cialdini says, that Just no building lacks an architecture, no choice lacks a context. Let's assume that we all understand how to do that. We tend to work with this a lot. That gives us quite an interesting challenge. That's the answer to the question of the psychology of climate change action, inaction, is how you package things. But if you know how to do that, particularly around the non-conscious efforts to get people to change their behaviour, it does give you another question, which is kind of custodia ipsos custodes. So who guards the guards? Because if you do know how to change behaviour, you do have to be responsible with how you do it. So I'm going to leave you with that. Proximal constructions, context, evidencing other people's behaviour are some really significant ways in which you can package the information that you have and get people to act rather than enact, if that is a verb.